Good evening. Welcome to Sound Off. I'm your host, John Blaschke. We're here in the Soundview Community TV studio where guests like you can come on and talk about whatever they want to talk about to their heart's desire, to the people listening at home. So for the people listening at home today, we have a very special guest, and it's a very topical guest, one very fitted for the season. We have Mr. Charles Rosenay here, and he's going to tell us a bit about the book that he wrote, as well as he runs Fright Haven in Stratford. So Charles, would you mind telling me a bit about yourself?
So growing up, I loved the Beatles. I loved horror stuff, monster movies, and I've been very fortunate that I've been able to make my love of these, pop culture things, not just my passion, but, some of the things that I do for a living. I'm a DJ by trade. I entertain at parties, and I've been doing that for many years. But all my sidelines have been really cool, between producing Beatles conventions, tours to Liverpool for Beatle fans, Dracula tours to Transylvania, and the haunted house Fright Haven was something that I built, curated, ran up until last year. And it all led to me putting together a book called The Book of Top 10 Lists, which just came out. It's all celebrities giving their favorite horror themes, horror movies, horror topics.
So how did you wind up collecting all that information? Because I skimmed through the book a bit, and how many people did you end up having to include in your book?
Well, so the book was one of these labor of love. You hear the people, take their whole lives to record an album, or their whole lives to write their novel. For me, it was a different situation. I had a column online, a newsletter, an e-newsletter that people could get by email called National Horror Happenings. And it was, a review of the latest horror movie, a preview of what was coming up, a news item about a horror star, whatever. I just did that, and it was for something called Examiner.com, which went out of business. But once a month, I would get a celebrity's top 10 list, and that was the most read and the most enjoyed and the most commented on column. People loved seeing top 10 lists. They loved hearing what was the favorite movies of people who they didn't know were, loving horror movies. And when the pandemic hit, all the things that I do, I couldn't do. I couldn't go out and DJ parties. I couldn't book bands. I couldn't do music festivals. I couldn't do the tours. I'm like home watching horror movies with my kids and not knowing what to do. And I remembered that I had about 80 of these lists on a computer in a database. And I thought, well, wait, wouldn't that make a great book? Who doesn't want to know what William Shatner's top 10 horror movies are? Or you mentioned Pete Best before, the original drummer of the Beatles. It's those pop culture type names, which are, very, very, there's a plethora of them in the book. And so it's just a cool book that's so people are loving it. It's getting great reviews on Amazon. I only needed 10, 20 more lists. So I got on the horn. Everyone else was home just like I was. Nobody was really going out and doing anything. So the rock stars, the movie people, they were all very accessible and were able to get their lists really quick. Got the book off. A publisher fell in love with it. Bear Manor Media out of Florida fell in love with it. And they said, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. They'd put out other pop culture books, rock books, horror books, and all that. And it was great to not have to self-publish.
I could see that being like a big book that they would want to push on BuzzFeed or something like that. They're always doing their top 10 list.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up watching David Letterman, and his top 10 list was an influence. I always loved top 10 lists, and I'd always write them. At the end of the year, I'd write my top 10 favorite rock songs, my top 10 favorite movies, and I probably have all these lists going back
so can we expect some sort of compilation?
Well, when the book came out, crazy enough, I got lists from people who I had requested lists from, and why didn't they give it to me in time? Really cool people, Gilbert Gottfried, Bobby Rydell, the singer, and I said, all right, you know what, I got 30 already, we'll go for another 70 more, and I'll do the Bride of Top 10 Horror List. So there will be a sequel to it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So what exactly was your inspiration, or what got you started with Fright Haven? How did you go about starting that enterprise?
Well, so loving the horrors, loving the monsters, loving all that stuff. I'm a producer at heart, I'm a promoter. I love to take a project and find ways to make it great. I felt that there wasn't a world-class haunted attraction between New York and New Haven. and I felt that there wasn't a great indoor one. You know, we had a bunch of outdoor ones which were phenomenal. I mean, really like as good as there are in the rest of the world. And I'll mention names, but I don't want to leave out others. There's Trail of Terror. Right. There was the Haunted Graveyard, which was originally in Lake Compounds. It's moved into Lake Quasi in a different way. There's Legends in Shelton. Right. These are great places. But what Fright Haven was an indoor place. A place that can be open if it pours, if it snows, no matter what the weather is. And when you're inside, it lends itself to more of a creepy, scary thing. So when we originally opened in West Haven, and it was open, 2006, 2007, 2008, in those years. And we had a great location. I thought we'd be there forever, but the building was it was in such bad shape that we couldn't continue there. And we took many years off till we found the place in Stratford, which we fell in love with. It's the corner of the Plaza Stratford Square, which has Marshalls and McDonald's, and if you're a local person watching the show, you're familiar, LA Fitness and 99 House. And if you go way back, it was originally a Showcase Cinemas, then it became Bally's Gym, and then it was closed for years and years, that maybe there would be a TNT fireworks shop or something in there. So we took it over and built into it. We really made it the building. Every corner is scarce. But last year, John, I didn't think we'd open. I mean, we're talking about the pandemic and COVID and who's going to go out. So I put it out there that I was willing to bring in partners for sale, whatever the case may be, and a company out of Kentucky who had 9 other haunted attractions felt they could go ahead with it, put in the station, do everything they could to make it COVID acceptable. But, dumb me, a haunted house is already socially distanced in a way. Yeah. Because you're coming in with a group, then there's 6, 10 feet, whatever, then there's another group and all that. I was afraid to do that, but they weren't. So they went ahead and took over Fright Haven, and it's been unbelievably successful. They put in even more than it was. And it's, it's not just Connecticut's largest. It's not just the scariest. It's just the best haunted attraction, and it's great that it's in the area.
And and not for nothing, what's scarier than a pandemic too? A worldwide pandemic, I mean, you got that going for you right there.
Well, yeah, so when it opened, I proposed it's 3 attractions, there's the asylum, there's this, I said, come on, we have to do, the pandemic, the virus one. Mm-hmm. And they said, nah, too soon.
It's funny because I went to one last year and they were really banking on that. That was the whole theme that they did. So I mean, some people would say it was too soon.
Yeah. But it's obvious, right? That's a great one, and have the hazmat suits and all that. Yeah.
For sure. So can I ask what initially got your interest in the horror genre?
My mom, believe it or not, my mom said she loved horror movies. We grew up in New York listening to AM radio. So all the things that they listened to, Motown and Four Seasons, I loved and grew to love the Beatles, the Monkees, all that. Mm-hmm. But my parents loved watching horror movies, which weren't horror movies then. They were monster movies, Godzilla and Frankenstein and all that. And my mom said, you got to start with Frankenstein. That's the way to start. And you can ease up. If you go to an amusement park, you start on the merry-go-round, then you build up to the roller coaster. So you start with a monster movie like a Frankenstein. And in those days, there was the 3 networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And then there were 3 local channels, Channel 5, Channel 9, Channel 11. I grew up in the Bronx. And so the only time you could watch a film, and people who are watching this who are younger than I am may not know that there was no such thing as Netflix. There was no such thing as streaming. There weren't DVDs or VHS. You could not watch things when you wanted to. You had to watch it when the station showed it.
You had to wait for the TV guide to come
That's
out.
right. We lived on the TV guide. You're so right. And the TV guide was great because my mom saw that the $1 Million movie was showing Bride of Frankenstein. Now, $1 Million movie would be on every night at 7:30. I think it was Channel 9, WOR in New York, and it would show the same movie. So if it was Mutiny on the Bounty, Inherit the Wind, whatever the movie was, Casablanca, it would show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It would show the whole week, figuring that there's people who can only see it once a week and they wouldn't miss it. No repeats, no rewinding, none of that. So Monday night, we settle in. She puts on Bride of Frankenstein. And John, I will not watch it. It's probably the only time in my life as a kid I went to bed early. I never went to bed early. I went to bed early. I was scared. I was honestly frightened. And I don't know if it was the build-up to it or the music. I don't really know what it was. And the next night, she said, we're going to do it again. She put blankets.
You're not allowed to close
no
your eyes.
blankets on us. No, she didn't say you can't close your eyes, but she did the Jiffy Pop popcorn, the warm milk. You know, it was a little more of a
comforting.
seduction, right? And I did. I watched it like that. You know, where you look in between the eyes. You know what I mean? You call that. By the third night, I was watching it and paying attention, and on Thursday I was like, I was reciting lines back. And Friday when I woke up,
That's how they brainwashed you.
they got me. They got me. But Friday when I got up, I was like, when is it going to be on? I couldn't tell time. I couldn't wait to see it again. And we took out the TV guide, just like you said, the TV guide. And we looked for when is Dracula coming. And we would do that week to week. And I was hooked. They bought me the monster models, which you built as a kid. There was a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland. I would have to get every issue. In the book, you know, I do an introduction, and I talk about how I was, you know, indoctrinated. And there's a picture, and I don't think we could get it online. We should probably, but I'll show it to you. It's me in my pajamas as this little fat little kid with the monster models played out. Right?
Do you mind if I show it? Or
If you can show it, that would be great. No, I don't know if we can, you know, zoom in on that. And in the background is a poster of the Beatles, which that sums it up. That describes my whole childhood there. Well, no, it doesn't. It was baseball and the Mets. But that was pretty much what it was. You're talking about me as a kid with the monster models, with the Beatles poster in the background. And it's sort of like legitimized, gave credibility to the truth that I was a monster kid, that I loved it from the beginning. That's how I fell in love with it. And ever since, you know, I say in the book, and I'm honest about it, 9 out of 10 monster movies, horror movies, probably suck. But the one that's great, it's worth it. And growing up a Mets fan and a baseball fan, I kind of did the correlation. You know, 9 out of 10 games they would lose, but for the one that they would win, it would be worth it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And even some of the cheesier ones is still a good one.
Yeah.
They're good for different reasons.
Yeah, well, when you're that age, the cheesier ones weren't cheesy. You see, you know, the colossal beast, this giant man picking up toy Tonka trucks. You know, whoa, this is unbelievable. It's real. And as you get older, it becomes kitsch. It becomes nostalgia, and it becomes more fun than it probably was the first time around. But it's so generational with horror movies, because depending on the age person, you know. They'll look at the cover and they'll see Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy. They'll see the classics. But to other people, classics are Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees and Chucky. So there's a whole different generation of the difference from monster movies to horror movies to today's stuff, which is just, you know, even The Exorcist, which is, to me, the greatest horror film of all time, might be tame compared to movies that come out now to some people.
In terms of like how like gruesome they are, and like how, like, you know, like in your face, like sort of like intense.
How gruesome they are, and and ultimately is how they scare, how much they scare. You know, a film like the Conjuring series might be more realistic, so therefore people can relate to it. And when it's closer to home, to me the most scary films are the home invasion type films, like Strangers, those type of films, where, you know, my gosh, that could happen. Let's pray it never does kind of movie.
Yeah, it's sort of like the realer there. It kind of gives them more of that authenticity.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right, because through the years, dating back to even Orson Welles doing War of the Worlds on the radio, where people believed that aliens were attacking, or the first time people saw Night of the Living Dead, they believed that, you know, people could come back to life and do that kind of danger, and that was very, very scary.
It's a scary duck.
Oh my God, totally.
It's the monster duck.
No, we didn't hear that. It's just you and I heard
I know you mentioned Frankenstein before.
I'm trying
I
to
know
turn
that
it
you
off.
mentioned Frankenstein before. Would you
Yes.
say he's your favorite monster, or was he just the one that got you into it?
Definitely my favorite monster of those times was Frankenstein. You know, your first is always your best.
So it was like your favorite movies too?
Yeah. And, you know, people say, if you have to go back to a Frankenstein movie, which is the one? And they're surprised that I don't pick, you know, I pick Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, because that was a combination of the best of the comedy team with the best of the monsters.
I was going to say Young Frankenstein is one of my personal favorites.
So someone in here, one of the rock stars, does their top 10 list of favorite horror comedies, and that's in it. And also, we're getting a call.
Yeah, someone was really excited to
Wow.
ask you a question. Hi, you're on Soundview. Do you have a question for our friend here, Charles?
Hey, John, real quick, it's Cheryl. The first 5 minutes didn't make it onto the air, so could you
Yeah.
please reintroduce your guest and talk about his book? Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you, Cheryl. So we missed the first 5 minutes. I don't know how that happened. It's that movie magic.
Did we miss it, or did she just miss it?
I couldn't tell you, but she asked a bit of a repetition. No? Well, we're gonna move on. Actually,
Yeah.
sorry, Cheryl.
Yeah, we'll recap at the
We
end.
do have a live stream on YouTube, so we could plug the YouTube later. It's a Soundview Studio A on YouTube. So if you go to Soundview Studio A, it'll be on there eventually. We're gonna have a recap of it if you'd like to see it then. My apologies. Where was I? Oh, we were talking about your favorite monsters, right?
Yeah, and so I remember Frankenstein being the greatest, but I'll tell you what was most interesting. You know, we harken back to when Bride of Frankenstein was the first one I saw. Finally, weeks, months, I don't know how long, comes out in the TV guide that Frankenstein, the original, is going to be on with Boris Karloff, the James Whale film, and it's, oh my gosh, this is exciting. This is what we've been waiting for. I'll get to it after we get our call, right?
Hi, you're on Sound Off with John and Charles. Do you have a question for Charles?
Well, just a couple of comments, but thank you very much. The first thing I want to say is you have not mentioned The Mummy by Boris Karloff or The Werewolf by starring Lon Chaney Jr.
So here's The Mummy with Boris Karloff. In this corner is not the werewolf, but the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr.
Sorry, the Wolfman.
Right.
Yes, I'm sorry, you're right. And you had me thinking, which movie scared me the most in my lifetime? You won't even think of it as a horror movie, but the movie that scared me the most?
What was it?
Jaws.
Oh, so that's great. And I'm going to get back to my Frankenstein story. I'm glad you mentioned that, because since my book has come out, the two movies that people talk about and say, well, are they a horror movie, are Jaws and, ready for this, King Kong, who I put on the cover as well. And
That's amazing, because
The monster movies.
Jaws had me under the theater seat.
yeah,
And the first time I saw King Kong, which was on the $1 Million movie,
right.
okay?
Yeah.
And this may sound a little gross, but it made me puke.
Wow, then it did its job. You know, I always say at the haunted house, if we make people do.
Those are my memories of horror movies that I wanted to share with you, and I appreciate the show you're doing tonight. And guys, thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you for calling. Hopefully you
you.
pick up the book. You are going to love it. So first I'll address what he's come up with is what defines a horror movie. What defines, in King Kong's case, it was a monster movie. And in its day, it scared people. He saw it on the TV, and it had that effect on him. Imagine, you know, people who went to see it in a theater, and they see the giant gorilla attacking. It's like, whoa, this is, you know, in its day, you know, even further back, if you go to silent movies, the first time people saw things on celluloid, who saw it in a theater, thought it was real. They ran out of the theater. They were so petrified, even of a train in a
How did I
theater.
get him to look like that?
Right? It's unbelievable.
Coming right at me.
So my determination why Jaws definitely fits the genre and why King Kong does is because they scare. If they scare you, that's what it's all about. And, you know, Psycho scared people to the point that they wouldn't go into showers. Jaws scared people to the point they wouldn't go to the beach. They wouldn't go off the shore. So yes, definitely Jaws fits that. Going back to my Frankenstein story, we finally were going to watch Frankenstein. We sat down, we watched it, and my mom says, wow, my imagination is either greater than I thought, or they've cut up this movie, but there's a scene missing. And I go, what are you talking about? She goes, well, when Frankenstein, the monster, the creature, not Frankenstein, the
Gotta
doctor,
differentiate,
is playing by the water with a little girl, and they're throwing lilies or flowers or whatever it is, and they're watching it float on the water, and it's such a cool thing, and the little girl's doing it, and Frankenstein has a friend, you know, Frankenstein's creature, he's so happy, he picks up the girl, throws her in the water. And of course, she doesn't float. And that's when the villagers go berserk, and that's when it's, all hell breaks loose. And my mom says, that scene was in there. I go, Mom, I don't think so. I think you probably, in your imagination, saw the villagers, figured what happened.
I saw it.
And she was right.
I saw it.
So they cut it out of
I
television.
think that's probably one of the most crucial parts of the movie, and they cut it out.
Exactly. They cut out that scene when it showed in the early days when it showed on TV.
Probably too graphic.
Too graphic, or the censors felt, or for whatever reason, right? I think too graphic. And you think about it now. I mean, that's graphic, but in those days it was. And sure enough, years later. I mean, come on, how did I not, do this research? But years later, we got the DVD set, and it was, the complete Universal Monsters collection.
Oh, yeah.
And there it was, and he picks her up and he throws her. I'm like, oh my God, Mom was right. And it's such a strong scene, and it wasn't just her imagination.
Yeah. So would you mind telling me a bit more about your haunted house that you run?
Right, so my goal for the haunted house was also the same goal as everything I do. I wanted to be if I was going there, what I would want the reaction to be. So if I'm producing a Beatles festival, we do Beatle events every summer. Last one was at in Ansonia.
Right.
And I produced over the summer when COVID kind of eased up a little, a paranormal convention. It was Connecticut's first Paracon, and it was great. I try to do things the way I want it done. If I'm DJing a wedding, I would want it how I would want mine to. So that's always my barometer. That's always my go-to point. And for a haunted house, I'd been to so many, and I thought the most important thing were startles. If someone's there in the corner, okay, that's creepy. Okay, you're going to point to that. But then there's someone on the other side, so that the person who was creepy was the distraction, and someone else jumps out. And then if you walk into a room and you see a bed, okay, you think that someone's going to jump out from under the bed. Well, there's a closet where someone jumps out from. So I always try to do that twist, that surprise.
It's like a decoy that you throw in there.
A decoy, yeah. And I think it's changed a little now. Now it's going for a higher level. It's got animatronics. It leans more on sophistication. When I first started, we were painting everyone's faces. The makeup was very primitive, and now it's all airbrushed. So it's on another level, and it's not exactly how I would do things, but I see that it's the natural progression, and it's probably a better value for the people who are paying their $25 to come in. They're getting more from it. At the end of the haunted house now, there's a coffin ride. There's virtual reality. There's an escape room. So there's a lot. It's become an entertainment center. So people, I'm sure people who love haunted houses have been to Fright Haven, but if they haven't and they're from the area, or even if they're watching this over a friend's house, they're going to have a treat. The best time to go, of course, is this week because it's Halloween, and there's no better time to get scared. It's when every channel is running their marathons. It's
all been building up to this.
Yeah, no doubt.
Is there like a particular theme that your house is taking? I know you mentioned like an asylum before, and possibly like the virus like sort of route. But is there a particular theme this year?
So every year, we try to change up one of the rooms. There's 3 rooms. Some years we get really, very ambitious and change 2 or maybe 3. This year went in so surprised. They took out the clown haunt, which was a 3D room, and it made sense because we couldn't use 3D glasses and use them, reuse them, and
Right.
it was not COVID friendly. You can't wash them, you can't sterilize them.
So people hate clowns. They're terrified of them.
And people hate clowns, right? So it's
always
really
nice,
funny
too.
because the calls we're getting, is it true there's no clowns? Good. Oh, yes, good. Okay, I'm coming. So for as many people who want to go and be terrified, there are really that many people who are so petrified of clowns that they don't want to go there because of the, so anyway,
It makes sense.
that's
yeah.
been turned into a witch's coven. Which is the first time we've ever done that. So it's the witch's house. It's really amazing. If you're into art, design, if you're into architect, if you're into anything like that, you go in there and you don't go on a busy night, because busy night there's people in front of you, behind you. You're zipping out there. On a time where you can really go and analyze and look at all the stuff. The amount of work that was put into it is amazing. Kara, who's the general manager now and runs things, really is amazing when it comes to detail. And there's ways to make a wall look like it's 1,000,000 years old and look like it's really from an ancient building, and they do that, and it's beyond my pay grade. I wouldn't even know how to do distressing of walls and the ways they do it.
Can I get some insider trading maybe here? What sort of days do you think would be the best to go? Like what days are you open, the hours?
Well, most people want to go, believe it or not, when it's the busiest anyway. Mm-hmm. It's like you want to go to a movie theater even though it's packed because you want to get that reaction.
Right.
You want to hear people screaming in front of you and behind you. So obviously Saturday and Fridays are the busiest. Saturday's the busiest night by far, followed by Friday, followed by the Sunday. But anytime you go, you're going to have a great time. And
Are you open every day of the week?
No, just weekends.
Okay.
Yeah, just weekends. And you can visit the website, frighthaven.com, and that's got the information for the haunted house.
Okay, great. And before we go, as a big Beatles fan myself, I know it's very Halloween-esque. We want to talk about your book and how everything's all scary and stuff like that, but I'm a big Beatles fan myself, my favorite band of all time.
Wow.
But I have some vinyl records and stuff like that of the Beatles. I've always been very invested in them. So I wanted to talk to you a bit about that too.
Sure.
The Beatlemania thing sounded really cool. Would you mind telling me a bit more about the Beatle tours to London that you do, or
Well,
Liverpool?
it started out, I'll sum up real quick. I used to publish a magazine on the Beatles called Good Day Sunshine for about 20 years. I started doing the Beatle conventions, which have morphed into the Beatle festivals, which are more music oriented. And the Beatle tours we do at liverpooltours.com bring Beatle fans and friends to London and Liverpool every summer for the Beatles tour, which is just amazing. It's the ultimate. And for horror fans, we do a Dracula tour, which goes to Transylvania. And we have a group going out tomorrow for a week.
Wow.
And that's dractours.com. But all the websites, all the information is in the book. And if people are interested in the book, there's a website for that too. It's www.bookoftop10horrorlists.com, which is the number 10. And it's the websites for everything we've discussed are in the book. Or they can just call you at the station, right, and get all that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Or if they want to call in and be on the show, yeah, we have the number. I guess we're not doing call-ins now because we're winding up the show.
Running out of time.
But yeah, 1 minute, okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to add within the last minute?
Mighty Joe Young did not even make the book.
Aw.
And I love Mighty Joe Young. And the sequel and the remake of it wasn't too bad. It's really funny because when we go through the book, there's an amazing glossary and index, and you could look it up in the back and see, okay, well, let's look at that movie. Who picked that particular movie? Mighty Joe Young was actually picked by Donna Lauren, who was a famous actress who was a dancer on Hullabaloo. That's great that he mentioned it, and it's in there.
Yeah, really great stuff. Well, I'd like to thank you once again, Charles. It was great having you here. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And stay tuned for next week. We'll be on next week, same time. Make sure to call in, be on the show. Sweet dreams, everyone. Happy Halloween.